Hi there, welcome to Chapter 1. This is your video lesson for week 2 of the class. And in this lesson, we're going to cover Chapter 1 of Writing Guide with Handbook. That is your text for the class. Now, if you haven't downloaded the text yet, let me walk you through your two options for accessing that. Your textbook is 100% free, totally downloadable on your computer. You don't have to go buy it anywhere or look for it anywhere. It is here and you'll just get it with a few clicks. It'll be really easy. If you haven't done so already, go back to the course homepage, click on the syllabus and scroll down the syllabus a little bit and it will show you a link to the textbook. Now, if you download through that link, you're going to get a full copy of the whole textbook, beginning to end. Some people like to have the whole thing. And if that's you, great. That's how you get the book. If that's not you, and you'd rather have smaller chunks, just the chunks that we're going to be studying, because we won't be studying the whole entire thing during our time together, you can download each weekly reading in each week's module as we go. So if you want to do that, the weekly reading is right here on this page where you found this video. So go ahead and download that there. I'd really suggest that you do the reading before you watch this video. That's why the reading is posted in the lesson before the video. Read through the reading once and then come back and watch this video so that you can get a sense of what some of the main points of your reading are and maybe review some concepts. So if you have questions about any of that, send me a message via the inbox and we'll chat back and forth about what you need. Chapter 1 starts with a question. What do you carry into the classroom? What comes with you when you start a new class? Now, this is obviously not a physical carrying. You're not walking into a classroom, you're not bringing books or anything like that. But what are you carrying in more of a figurative sense? You're carrying your personal experience. And when we talk about studying composition or writing, it's important to think about our own personal experiences with language, with culture, and with literacy. And when I say literacy, I'm talking about the place of reading and writing in your life. What role has that played in your life to this point? Another thing that you carry is your unique viewpoint, where you're coming from as a person. You also carry your connection to various communities and your communication skills across different media. You use media every day, I'm sure. I'm sure you have a phone. I'm sure you have your computer or your iPad or whatever you use for school in that way. And you have various communication skills that if I were to speak to you face to face, you would be able to kind of give me an evaluation of where you feel like you're at with those skills. Maybe you love social media. Maybe you love posting on Instagram, or you love Snapchat, or you love Twitter, or maybe you love books. Maybe you love good old-fashioned books that you hold in your hand, or maybe your Kindle is with you all the time, or you have your Kindle app on your phone. Or maybe your communication skills are more face-to-face and you really like being in person, and maybe this class is a stretch for you because we're not in person. So everyone comes at this with a little bit different variety of communication skills. And I want you to be thinking about all of those categories. What are you carrying with you as you come to the class? Another thing I want you to be thinking about is this idea of what is rhetoric, because when we enter a composition class, rhetoric is something that comes up right away. And that's a word that can sound a little bit academic, a little intimidating maybe even for some people. Maybe they aren't quite sure if they have quite the right idea of what rhetoric actually is, but I want to simplify that for you. Rhetoric just refers to techniques and theories of communication, which means ways and ideas about the way we communicate with each other. Now, originally, rhetoric was considered an art of persuasive speaking or writing, and it was kind of its own thing that got set up on a pedestal, and people would study it and develop their skills in rhetoric, and it was kind of separate from everyday life. But now things are very different in our world. We live in a culture where everyone carries a phone with them. Almost everyone is on some sort of social media, and a lot of us are truly communicating with each other all the time. And because we're communicating with each other all of the time, we're constantly in rhetorical situations. In fact, you might be in multiple rhetorical situations right now. One of your rhetorical situations is that you are watching a video that your professor made for you for this class. So your professor is communicating with you through this video, and it's not two-way communication because you can't communicate back, but I have created a message in a certain condition for you to listen to. I bet your phone is next to you, and I bet you might have something going on that phone. You might have just texted a friend. You might have just sent a DM in Instagram. You might have just been on Snapchat. You may have been scrolling Twitter. You might be scrolling Twitter right now as I'm talking to you. You are in multiple rhetorical situations right this minute if that's what's going on. That's just the kind of life that we live. That's the way life is now. So if you take a look here, you'll see all communication involves a rhetorical situation. It takes place under certain conditions, and it involves certain agents, people, or groups. This is true of social media, and it's true of academic writing. And we're going to talk about social media to make the jump to academic writing, and you'll see how the principles translate from one to the other really, really easily. Another question that we are going to deal with is, what does it mean to be critical? Sometimes people really fear the word critical. They fear that it implies being mean, it implies being judgmental, but the way we're using it here in this class is to just mean the opposite of ordinary. When you look at something with a critical eye, you're not just looking at it in an ordinary way. You're looking at it to understand it and to evaluate it in some way. Again, this doesn't mean you're looking at it to be mean or judgmental or any of the ways we usually hear the word critical being used, but here it means you're looking at it with an intention, intentionally. So a critical reader knows how to analyze distinctions, interpretations, and conclusions. A critical writer makes distinctions, interpretations, and conclusions that stand up to scrutiny. A critical thinker exercises reason and judgment when reading, writing, listening, or speaking. So going into a situation from a critical stance it's not a relaxed activity, and it's something we do when we want to accomplish something. We want to improve our critical reading and writing strategies and skills. And so we're going to talk a lot about what those skills are and how we can improve. Okay, now let's return to this idea of the rhetorical situation. In order to understand a rhetorical situation, you have to be critical. You have to look closely. You have to look intentionally at that situation to try and understand it. So, to talk more deeply about this, let's look at social media. When you post on social media platforms, you likely anticipate an audience. You're hoping or expecting to reach people. You're also reacting to the conditions of the platform. You might post different content or different kinds of media on different platforms. So, in other words, On Facebook, I'm old, so I use Facebook. Not very much anymore though, because I kind of prefer Instagram. But on Facebook, I know that my audience is family members who are far away and friends that maybe I'm not super close to. That's my Facebook audience. If I post something to Facebook, it's meant to go to that audience. My daughter, she's a teenager, she's on Snapchat. She has different audiences in different groups on Snap, okay? It just depends who she wants to talk to. And that audience will determine what type of rhetorical situation she is in. You see how that works? If you're working with Twitter, there's some strict conditions of that platform. You only have a set number of characters. So you're going to communicate in ways that are appropriate to that limited rhetorical situation or those conditions that Twitter has put on you. Now let's look a little more closely at this idea of conditions of the rhetorical situation. We're going to focus on 3 of them. The first one is the genre. Now when I say genre, you may jump right to thinking, oh, genres are things like mystery, suspense, thriller, or something like that. But actually, there are many, many more genres. Genres are simply a mode in which you communicate. So genres are not just types of stories. It's a much broader term that actually applies to all these different ways that we can communicate with each other. So some examples that you can see here are a text message or a blog post. When you send a text message, that's going to sound totally different than a blog post would sound because those are 2 different genres. A Twitter post and an Instagram post are going to sound very different, or they can sound very different if you're choosing to use the platform in the way it was designed, okay? So genre makes a huge difference. A blog post is going to sound different than an academic essay. All those genres are different. If I'm talking on the phone to my mom, that's a different genre of communication than if I'm writing a handwritten letter to an old professor in college who doesn't have email. Or even if I do write it in email, that email is going to sound different than a phone call might sound. So genre makes a big difference. Your purpose also is a condition that's very important in your rhetorical situation. Your purpose is your reason for communicating. What do you want to do with this message? Do you want to inform someone of something? Do you want to persuade them to do something or think a certain way? Do you want to argue your point? Do you want to make them laugh? Do you want to entertain them? Or do you want to impress them for some reason so that they will really think highly of you? So purpose makes a huge difference when it comes to your rhetorical situation. Also, your stance. Where are you coming from? What opinion do you have? Or what is your viewpoint or your take on a situation? That's also going to influence the conditions of your rhetorical situation. We also think about the context of a rhetorical situation, the social, political, or economic setting. Communicating with people after 2+ years of a worldwide pandemic, many cases and issues related to social unrest, political upheaval, all those things have made communicating now different from just a few years ago because our context has changed. We have to think more about who we're talking to and what we're saying to them and what we're communicating to them. Also, culture is a huge part of our rhetorical situation. What traits or values do we share with our audience, and what ones don't we share? And how does that change how we communicate? Your text gives the example of Selena Gomez as a social media trailblazer. And the reason that they do this is because Selena Gomez has been super savvy in how she's used the rhetorical situation of her, specifically Instagram account, mostly, I think, to really maximize her communication to her followers in a way that's positive, in a way that builds people up and creates a positive effect in the world. So you can read through what some of her background information is there. As of the recording of this video, she actually has 343 million followers. So her following continues to grow. And if you want to take some time to visit her Instagram, you can tell it's clearly curated and well-intentioned and managed with an understanding of her purpose and her audience. What she's attempting to do is advocate for physical and mental health causes. She was a participant in the hashtag Share the Mic Now movement that happened not too long ago, within the last couple of years. And she basically says, if something good isn't coming out of it, I'm not going to do it. So she is, like I said, very social media savvy and a great example of a person who understands her rhetorical situation when it comes to what she puts out on social media. Your text gives you some discussion questions that you can, if you want to use them to journal a little bit about Selena Gomez and about these ideas of how she uses her rhetorical presence on social media, you can just go ahead and go through those on your own if you want to. You are not required to go through those though. So one of the skills we really want to build is our ability to read critically. And that means that when you read something, you're doing more than just following along. You're reading actively. And to read actively, you have to ask questions of whatever it is that you're reading. And then you have to accept or reject the conclusions based on your answers. So some questions that you can ask of whatever you're reading is what I'm reading fair? For example, is it unbiased? Does it provide credible evidence? Does it make sense? Or is it reasonably plausible? And where can I learn more about points that interest me? When you actively read something and ask those questions, you're reading critically. Now, when it comes to social media, we are often looking at images, and images pose their own problems for critical readers. Images require that we read them as well. When we are on social media, we're not only reading captions and reading text, we're reading images constantly. Now, when we read an image, information is presented all at once. It's not always clear to us what's important, and it takes a little bit of time to scan the whole image and figure out what's important. Our interpretation of what's important depends on several factors: our experience, our culture, and our education. Now, if you look closely at this picture, I don't know if you've spent any time looking at this, but you'll see that it's a picture of both a young woman and an old woman at the same time. And it's one of those fun things where you can ask yourself, what do I see first? At different times, I see different things. Right now, it's super easy for me to see the old woman, and it takes a second for me to switch in my head and see the young woman actually looking away from the camera. So take a second to look at that if you haven't already, and think a little bit about what it is that you see and maybe why you see that image first. Memes are another way that we see rhetorical situations at work. They underscore how images can rely on context for their meaning. So formally, a meme is a unit of cultural transmission, the cultural equivalent of a gene. Now that's kind of a complex definition, but today the word usually refers to a kind of image that spreads online. We're all very familiar with memes. Now, in what ways do memes engage with their rhetorical situation? And one answer to that question might be that memes are meant quite often for a specific audience. So next time you see one of these turn up in your life, take a close look at it and see if you can figure out who made that meme and who did they make it for. Sometimes the audience is broad, sometimes the audience might be narrow, sometimes it might be easy to understand what the meme is communicating. Other times it might be a little bit more complex. Here's an example. My husband works in the fire service, and he sent me a video the other day where it was just a clip of a movie, and the different characters were labeled as different members of the fire service. And the clip of the movie matched what happens in a very specific situation for people who work in that line of work. So only firefighters and maybe their significant others would understand what that meme was really saying. So you can see that the rhetorical situation is very specific. It was made by firefighters to be understood by firefighters. Now, how does all of this fit into the context of academic writing? In any rhetorical context, we choose what details to emphasize or to share in the first place. We consider our audience, we consider our purpose, and we choose what to say and how to say it. Rhetorical situations also inform our choices of presentation, tone, style, and so on. Academic work has its own norms, but it relies on principles we already use every time we talk, text, post, or tweet. In other words, the good news is that you already have and use daily many skills that you already need. Thanks so much for viewing this video. This is the end of this quick summary of this week's reading. As always, let me know if you have any questions and contact me via the inbox. Thanks for watching.